This is a quick review of the glorious modular mechanical keyboard 2, also known as the GMMK 2. I have the larger version here in the 96% layout with the full numpad. The build quality is pretty solid at the price point with a top frame made from aluminum and a plastic bottom. The switches are exposed, which allows for vibrant RGB lighting. The bottom is pretty standard with the glorious logo and extendable feet. There are also 4 nicely textured rubber feet in the corners. On the back, we have the recessed USB-C port, and on the sides there are windows for more RGB to shine through. Altogether, it's a pretty attractive design and it feels solid and well built. Additionally, Glorious also includes a USB-C cable, switch puller, keycap remover, and alternate escape key. The GMMK2 weighs 1.25 kilograms, which is 2.75 pounds. That's just a little bit lighter than the more premium GMMK Pro, which is 3.5 pounds. The included keycaps are double-shot ABS with shine-through letters. Compared to a high-quality double-shot ABS keycap like the GMK Blue Samurai, it's easy to notice a difference in thickness and quality. The switches are Glorious's own Fox linear switches, which come pre-lubed. They're 3-pin, though the GMMK2 supports both 3 and 5-pin switches. The included stabilizers are plate-mounted and pre-lubed. The PCB also supports screw-in stabilizers. Let's check out how it sounds right out of the box. It actually sounds surprisingly good without rattling stabilizers or spring ping. Much like the GMMK Pro, it's actually a bit muted. With a few mods, we can clean up the sound and make it pop. First, we'll need to remove the keycaps. With the keycaps removed, we can get a better look at the keyboard. A nice little touch is that GMMK2 is printed on the PCB and visible by the spacebar. Now, let's get the switches removed. I would recommend using a better keycap puller and switch puller than the included ones if you want to be efficient. Next, we'll check the plate-mounted stabilizers for looseness. Mine are all solid, but if you have any that wiggle back and forth, you can use some athletic tape on the plate openings to get them tight. Now, we're going to take the stabilizers out. I recommend using tweezers to carefully unclip and pry the stabilizers from the plate. Take your time and repeat to remove all 6 stabilizers. You can set them aside on a paper plate. We'll work on modding them later on. Now we need to open the GMMK2. I'm using the Phillips head 1-bit on my WOW stick. The screws are actually torqued in pretty hard from the factory, so I need to manually loosen them before I can remove them. There are 17 screws in total, and they are all the same size and length, so just set them aside as you remove them. Once all the screws are out, the top just lifts off. Untape the connector in order to pull it loose. We have some case foam underneath the PCB, as well as some metal weights that are screwed to the bottom case. Back on the PCB, we can see that there are small squares of tape covering some screws. Let's remove them and then unscrew these in order to separate the PCB from the top frame. Once the top frame is removed, we can see that there's some plate foam between it and the PCB. We can also see on the PCB that there is support for screw-in stabilizers, but the openings on the top frame don't appear to be large enough to support all aftermarket stabs. It will for certain support Glorious's own GSV2s though. Now we can begin modding. The first thing I'm going to do is the Band-Aid mod, which is to put some pads on the PCB to dampen the impact of the stabilizers bottoming out. I prefer to only put these on the spacebar and backspace, as those are frequently hammered, but you can choose to put them on all the stabilized keys or none at all. Once those are on, let's move on to the PE foam mod. The PE foam mod works by placing a thin layer of PE foam between the PCB and the switches. This changes the sound profile of the switches to make them more poppy and accentuate their sound. Since Glorious provided plate foam, we can just trace it on our sheet of PE foam to get the general shape. We also need to mark where the stabilizers will be, so that we can cut out some holes for them. Otherwise, they'll sound and feel too mushy. Once you have your outline, go ahead and cut it out. I also did a quick check to make sure that the stabilizer holes matched up. Once the PE foam is ready, line it up on the PCB. You can press down on it over the screw posts, and it should just tear, and the posts will hold the PE foam in place. Place the plate foam back on over the PE foam and then line up the top frame over that. Let's flip the entire contraption over so that we can screw the PCB back onto the top frame, holding both our plate and PE foam in place. We can now put back the square pieces of tape covering these screws. We can also reattach the USB connector, remembering to tape over that as well. Don't forget the side RGB diffusers. Finally, we'll screw down all 17 screws to reattach the top frame to the bottom case. We can do a quick check around the perimeter to make sure everything is tight and aligned. We're almost done. Next, we'll mod our stabilizers. If you don't want to get lube on your fingers, you can wear some gloves. We'll first need to disassemble the stabilizers. You can do this by unclipping the wires from the housings and then pulling them out. The legs can then be removed from the housings. Next, we'll clean off the factory lube. I'm pretty lazy, so I just use a tissue paper to wipe off the stabilizer wires. In order to clean inside the stabilizer housings, I wrap the back of my paintbrush with some tissue paper and wipe around the inside of the housing to get rid of any lube. We also need to clip the little excess tabs off the stabilizer legs, which will make the bottoms flatter and eliminate some unpleasant bottoming out noise. It's easy with a cutting tool, but a sharp pair of scissors will work as well. We can quickly check if the stabilizer wires are balanced by placing them on a perfectly flat surface, such as an old smartphone. Finally, let's lube the stabilizers starting with the housing. Get a good even layer on all 4 of the inside walls. For the stabilizer legs, we just need to lube them on both of the sides that make contact with the housing. When placing the legs inside the housing, make sure that the side with 2 holes lines up with the front of the housing. Lastly, we'll lube our wires, getting a fairly thick layer on the ends of the wires as well as where the bend is. We can reassemble the stabilizer by sticking the wire through the housing into the leg and snapping it into place. Now we can reinstall the stabilizers into the top frame in the reverse order that we removed them. You can install a switch for the stabilized keys and test the stabilizers to ensure that they're operating smoothly before installing the remainder of the switches. When reinstalling the switches, take note of the direction. The GMMK2 has north-facing LEDs, so the opening on the switch should be facing up. Press each switch into the hot swap socket slowly but firmly. The pins and the center pole will tear through the PE foam without much force. You may want to alternate between installing rows of switches from the bottom and the top of the keyboard just to make sure that the PE foam is held down consistently. Take your time installing the switches and use a key tester to make sure that each one works. If any switches don't trigger a key press, remove them and check for bent pins. A bent pin can easily be straightened using tweezers or a similar tool. Now let's get the keycaps put back on and see how it sounds after the mods. Overall, I think that the GMMK2 is a good product and a great introduction to the world of custom mechanical keyboards, especially for beginners. It has surprisingly good performance out of the box and can be modded easily for some additional refinements. There are also advanced features such as support for screw-in stabilizers and QMK support to satisfy some enthusiast requirements. It's the same price for the 65 and 96%, so in terms of sheer value the 96% is better. But 65% is the more popular layout and suitable for most everyday tasks anyways. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.